Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Josh Clifford. Today marks the 75th anniversary of the fall of Ambon in the Netherlands East Indies. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony around Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
This week marks the 75th anniversary of the Japanese invasion of Ambon in the Netherlands East Indies, now Indonesia, on the 1st of February 1942. Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private William Doolan, who was killed in the defence of the island. William Thomas Doolan was born on the 15th of January 1913 in the Melbourne suburb of Werribee, Victoria, as the eldest son of Thomas and Emily Doolan. The Doolan family moved to Morwell in Gippsland, Victoria in the 1920s and became well known within the community. William Doolan later returned to Melbourne, eventually coming to live in Hawthorn with his wife and 2 daughters. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, Doolan volunteered for the Australian Imperial Force, enlisting on the 11th of July 1940. His younger brother, Martin, was already serving and would eventually become a prisoner of war after being captured by the Germans on Crete in May 1941. Private William Doolan became a driver with the newly raised 2nd 21st Battalion, which was part of the Australian 8th Division. The battalion carried out much of its training in Trawell in central Victoria and Bongilla on the Victoria-New South Wales border. In March 1941, the battalion began to move to Darwin. If the Japanese made an aggressive move into the region, the 2nd 21st Battalion would be sent to Ambon to reinforce Dutch forces defending the island. Such a move, however, could only take place once Japanese intentions were known. Japan was still neutral, and the Australians would not move prematurely into the Netherlands East Indies for fear of provoking them. The battalion spent 9 months in Darwin. It was only after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the opening of the war in the Pacific that Australian forces moved to Ambon in mid-December 1941. Along with an anti-tank battery, a field ambulance, and other supporting troops, the 2nd 21st Battalion formed part of Gulf Force. Even when combined with the Dutch troops, the force was modest, with limited rations and supplies and minimal transport, air, and artillery support. When the Japanese invaded Ambon on the 30th of January 1942, they quickly overwhelmed the Australian and Dutch defenders. Before dawn on the 1st of January, a small Australian reconnaissance patrol crept towards Japanese lines near the village of Kudamti. When the time came to withdraw, Doolan volunteered to provide cover. It was the last time he was seen alive. As Doolan ambushed 3 truckloads of Japanese soldiers, the retreating Australians first heard shooting and then silence. Doolan's bullet-riddled body was later found and buried. He was 29 years old. The Ambonese later picked up a popular tune from Australian prisoners of war and turned it into The Ballad of Driver Doolan, one version of which reads, "From his tree the Australian Doolan killed many men of Japan. He did not run away or move back, then died by the bullets of the men of Japan, calling his mother, father, wife and children, but they did not hear him." Fighting continued on Ambon until the 3rd of February. In the days following the surrender, the Japanese executed some 300 Australian and Dutch soldiers around the airfield at Lahar. The surviving members of Gulf Force spent the rest of the war as prisoners of the Japanese. A small number, around 30, escaped Ambon and made their way back to Australia. Private Doolan's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among some 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private William Thomas Doolan, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, or the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and good evening.